My coworker nearly cost me my job this week by stealing credit for a project I poured my soul into, and now he has the nerve to beg me to save his job. This all just happened, and I have no idea how it's going to end. A bit of background. I, 33M, work as a software engineer at a mid-sized tech company. We just spent the last 3 months developing a major update for one of our flagship products, something that could make or break our year. I became the de facto lead on the project's most challenging component after our actual team lead went on maternity leave. Enter my coworker, Dave, 35M, not his real name. Dave joined our team about a year ago. He's charismatic, great at schmoozing with higher-ups, and always quick to volunteer for visible tasks. But when it comes to actual work, Dave has a habit of coasting on other people's efforts, or swooping in at the last minute to claim credit. Over the past few months, I've practically lived and breathed this project. I often stayed late, debugging code and refining features, while Dave usually left by 5 p.m. on the dot. He was supposed to help with the database optimization, our system's backbone, but he mostly provided vague suggestions in meetings and delegated actual coding to me or our junior developer. At the time, I didn't care about recognition. I just wanted the project to succeed. I even felt a little sorry for Dave, figuring he was out of his depth but didn't want to admit it. So I kept quiet and pushed on. Fast forward to last week. We hit a major milestone. I finished the core functionality and got the update running smoothly in our test environment. It was a huge victory for me personally. After weeks of stress, seeing it work was like watching a baby take its first steps. I documented everything, prepared a demo, and wrote up a detailed report to share with the team and our department head, Laura. The morning of the milestone meeting, I walked into the conference room with a spring in my step, ready to demo what I had built. Most of the team was there, along with Laura and a couple of execs who were excited about our progress. But Dave was nowhere to be seen. 5 minutes before the meeting started, he rushed in with a flash drive and a stack of papers. I thought maybe he'd actually done something last minute. Spoiler, he had, but not what I expected. Laura kicked off the meeting and asked for the update on the project. Before I could even clear my throat, Dave jumps up. He plugs in his flash drive and starts running my demo. At first, I was just confused. Maybe he was going to credit me while presenting, which would be weird, but whatever. Instead, he narrates the whole demo, as if it's his work. He even referenced the detailed report I wrote, saying, "I've outlined here how I solved the performance issues we were having," and proceeds to walk everyone through my solutions. I shot him a look, trying not to show my shock. Inside, I was screaming, "He's using my work. Those are my slides, my code, my report." But in a room full of higher-ups, I felt paralyzed. I kept waiting for him to mention me, to throw even a single acknowledgement my way. He never did. To my disbelief, he ended the presentation with, "And that's how I managed to get us across the finish line a week ahead of schedule." Managed to get us across? He made it sound like he was the hero who pulled late nights, when, in reality, he'd contributed maybe 5% of the whole thing. I could feel my face getting hot. I was angry, but also embarrassed, thinking maybe I should have spoken up sooner. The execs started clapping and congratulating him on a job well done. One of them even said, "Excellent work, Dave. This is impressive. Give our compliments to the whole team." At that point, Dave finally gestured towards me and the others in the room and added, "Of course, I couldn't have done it without my team's support." That was it. Support. Not, "John here pulled most of the weight while I was coordinating," or anything true. Just a generic thanks. The meeting moved on to other agenda items before I could collect myself enough to say something. I walked out of that room feeling like I'd been punched in the gut. Our other teammates knew I'd done the heavy lifting. They shot me sympathetic looks, but no one said anything in front of the execs. I get it. Calling out Dave in front of our bosses felt risky and awkward in the moment. I was also partly to blame. I had handed Dave an opportunity on a silver platter by sharing my demo and report with the team beforehand, naively thinking we were all on the same side. As soon as we got out, I pulled Dave aside in the hallway. It took everything in me to keep my voice low and steady. I said, "What the hell was that, Dave? You just presented all my work as if it were yours." He had the audacity to look offended. "It's our project," he replied. "I'm the one who talked management into greenlighting it in the first place, remember? And I'm the face of it to the execs. You're great at the tech stuff, but you're not a presenter. I didn't think you'd mind me handling the demo." I couldn't believe it. Not mind? "Dave, you took credit for things you had no hand in. That report you passed off as yours? I wrote every word," he scoffed. "Details. Look, I'm sorry if you feel slighted, but I did contribute. I coordinated meetings. I kept us on schedule. Those things matter too. Management wants a single point person. Would you rather I told them you did everything? That would make the team look bad. This way, we all win." I was seething. No, you win, Dave. You're taking a victory lap while the rest of us watch. He then dropped the line that left me speechless. John, be reasonable. You'll get credit when the time is right. I mean, you're not really a people person. You should be glad I'm representing the work. It's for the good of the project. I felt like I was talking to a brick wall, a smug, credit-stealing brick wall. At that point, I just walked away before I said something I'd regret. That evening, I stewed over it at home. My girlfriend found me pacing in our living room, absolutely fuming. She urged me to email Laura, our department head, right away to set the record straight. I hesitated. Part of me worried that I'd come across as petty or not a team player by griping about credit. Plus, Dave was right about one thing. He had been the one giving management updates regularly, albeit filled with exaggerations. If I suddenly piped up with, actually, I did all the work, would it sound believable or like I was just bitter? I compromised by drafting an email to Laura that night, politely summarizing the progress and making sure to use I a lot like, I implemented X feature, and I resolved Y issue. I couched it as a follow-up technical breakdown, in case she was interested in more details beyond Dave's presentation. Before sending, I also looped in my direct manager, who was on vacation during our big meeting, so he'd be in the loop. I kept the tone professional, not accusatory, just factual. Hitting send felt scary, but also relieving. I was letting the truth be known, even subtly. The next day at work, I got a brief reply from Laura, thanking me for the detailed breakdown and saying she appreciates everyone's hard work. Hard to read whether she caught on to the situation. However, my manager, who I'll call Rob, responded more directly. He wanted to meet with me later that afternoon. When I walked into Rob's office, he got straight to the point. I read your email. Sounds like you did the lion's share on this project. I had a chat with Laura. She was under the impression that Dave was more involved in the actual implementation. I sighed and explained the whole story. How Dave had been managing up, taking credit, and that I didn't want to cause a scene, but also didn't want my work stolen. Rob listened carefully, nodding, then frowned. This isn't the first time I've heard about Dave riding coattails. I'll handle it. I left feeling a bit hopeful. At least management now knew the real story. Still, I worried about how handling it would play out. If Dave got wind that I went to our bosses, he'd see it as a betrayal. Office politics can get ugly, and I braced myself for backlash. Sure enough, I didn't have to wait long. Later that week, an email went out from Laura to our team and higher-ups, praising the successful milestone. In it, she wrote, "Special thanks to John for his excellent work on the core system improvements, and to Dave for his coordination efforts and presentation." It was a diplomatic way to acknowledge both of us, but the wording made it clear who did the heavy lifting. I noticed Dave was conspicuously quiet after that email, barely popping out of his cubicle all day. That brings us to yesterday. Our company had a big meeting with a potential client interested in our project's technology. A huge opportunity. Laura explicitly asked both Dave and me to prepare a presentation together for the client demo, likely as a result of the credit clarification. This was a chance for redemption. I'd finally get to show my work to stakeholders with my own voice. But when yesterday morning rolled around, I was in for a surprise. Dave approached me an hour before the client meeting, looking panicked for the first time. Apparently, he had just realized the client's execs were very technical, and they'd likely asked detailed questions about the system questions he still couldn't answer. To my astonishment, Dave actually asked me to essentially handle the technical Q and AMP-A and back him up if there were any deep dive questions. He framed it as, "We need to put up a united front. I'll present the overview section since I'm good at that, and you cover the nitty-gritty if they probe. It's make or break for the company, so no messing around." I stared at him, trying to keep my face neutral. Inside, I was boiling. This guy had stolen credit for my work, painted himself as the whiz kid to execs, and now, when faced with actually needing to know the stuff, he expects me to bail him out quietly. I saw the trap. If I refuse, the presentation could go south, and the company might lose this client, which would definitely not look good for me either, since I'm part of the team. If I agreed, Dave would once again stand up front and play the role of leader, with me as his unseen support. I told him we'd both better be up there presenting, taking turns, not just me feeding him answers from the sidelines. He gave a quick nod. "Yeah, of course. But I had zero trust that he wouldn't hog the spotlight again. We went into the conference room with the clients and started the presentation. As expected, Dave took the lead on introducing our project. I spoke up to add technical details whenever I could, making sure the clients heard directly from me on how things worked. It was a bit awkward, like we were two people trying to drive one car, with Dave constantly attempting to steer back to his talking points. Still, the demo itself went smoothly at first, thanks to all the work I'd done. The clients started asking questions, and that's where things went off script. One of the client's tech leads asked a pointed question about how our system would scale with their user load, a critical detail I knew inside and out. I began to answer, but Dave interrupted and tried to answer himself, spewing buzzwords but clearly floundering. The tech lead looked unconvinced. I jumped in, elaborated on our architecture and caching mechanisms in detail. The more I talked, the more it became obvious who actually understood the guts of the system. The client executives were now directing most technical questions at me, even prefacing with my name. I could see Dave shifting uncomfortably. After the Q&A, the clients stepped out to discuss among themselves. The minute we were alone, Dave rounded on me. Under his breath, he hissed, "What the hell are you doing? You're making me look like an idiot." I shot back, "I'm answering their questions with facts. You are out of your depth, Dave. That's not my fault." He was livid, but before he could say more, the clients came back in. They thanked us for the presentation and said they'd be in touch. They shook both our hands, but one of them specifically gave me a "really great work, we're impressed" comment. I swear Dave looked like he just bit into a lemon. After they left, Laura and Rob, who were also in the meeting, both seemed pleased overall, but I could tell Laura had noticed a little tug-of-war in the room. She didn't say anything then, just that we'd follow up when the clients reach out. Dave, on the other hand, barely mumbled a "good job" to me before bolting. I figured maybe this experience would humble him, or at least make him realize he can't keep pretending to know what he doesn't. Boy, was I wrong. This morning, I came into the office still uncertain if we'd land that client deal, but somewhat satisfied that I had finally been able to showcase my work openly. I expected Dave might keep a low profile out of embarrassment. Instead, I found an email from him in my inbox, with Rob and Laura CC'd, essentially taking credit for the successful client presentation and saying how his leadership and our team's expertise won them over. He did mention me, but only as a generic. My team's technical expert John provided excellent support. It was infuriating. The gall of this guy to spin it like he orchestrated the whole thing when half his answers were BS until I stepped in. I was drafting a reply to add more accurate detail in a polite way when I heard a knock on my cubicle wall. It's Dave, looking unusually serious. He asks if we can talk. I step into a small meeting room with him, and he closes the door. Then he says, "I think that presentation didn't cast me in the best light." Laura seemed a bit skeptical of my technical knowledge afterwards. I can't afford to have my reputation damaged here. You need to back me up on this. If anyone asks, we planned the whole good cop/bad cop dynamic in that presentation, okay? Like, I set you up to answer those tough questions on purpose as a team strategy. I couldn't help it. I let out a short laugh. You want me to lie to cover for you? He had the nerve to nod and say, "It's not lying, it's framing." Look, John, I need this job. I moved my family here for this. If management thinks I'm not capable, I could be on the chopping block. But if you support the story that this was all collaborative and I intentionally had you handle details, we both come out looking good. I stared at him in disbelief. Why should I do that? Give me one good reason. And then he dropped the bombshell. Because if I go down, I'm taking you with me. That email you sent to Laura? I can spin that as you trying to sabotage the project, make it look like you were withholding info from me to make me look bad in front of the clients. I'll tell them you deliberately undermined the presentation to push me out and take over. Who do you think they'll believe? The guy who's been giving them updates for months? Or the guy who suddenly decided he wants the spotlight? I felt like I'd been slapped. My hands literally shook with rage and fear. This wasn't just stealing credit now. This was a threat, a desperate, ugly threat. I took a moment to steady myself and said quietly, "Are you seriously threatening to sabotage me? After all I've done to actually make this project succeed?" Dave put his hands up defensively. "I don't want it to come to that. That's why we need to stick together. I know I handled some things badly, but we can fix it. Just help me keep my reputation intact, and I promise I'll make sure you're taken care of too." I told him I needed some air and just walked out. I went to the restroom to splash water on my face, heart pounding. I can't believe this is where we're at. This project that I poured my life into might end up tainted by office politics and lies. I haven't responded to his email or his threats yet. I did, however, save copies of every bit of evidence I have. Commit logs showing my work, earlier emails where I sent him updates, everything on a USB drive just in case. I'm posting this here because I'm livid and lost. Part of me wants to march to HR and throw that USB of evidence on their desk. Another part is afraid that if Dave's willing to play dirty, he could twist things enough to muddy the waters, and we both get dragged down. He's right that management has seen him as the point person for a while, even if that's changing now. I never imagined a coworker, someone I considered a friend at one point, would screw me over like this, and then basically blackmail me to save his own skin. I've always tried to avoid workplace drama, keep my head down, and do good work. Now doing good work is exactly what's put a target on my back from this credit-stealing jerk. I haven't decided my next move. Right now I'm just typing this out to vent and maybe get some perspective. Should I go straight to HR and risk an all-out war at work? Should I confront him in writing, email, CCing our boss, so it's documented? Or do I play along for now to save my own job and sanity and look for an escape route out of this company? I'm angry, confused, and honestly feeling a bit sick about going into the office tomorrow. Thanks for listening, and sorry this is such a long rant. I'll update if I figure out what the hell I'm going to do about Dave. Update 1. First, I want to thank everyone for the outpouring of advice and support on my original post. I didn't expect it to blow up like it did. Reading your comments gave me both the confidence and a much-needed reality check that I wasn't crazy or petty for feeling wronged. Many of you told me to go straight to HR with my evidence and not to confront Dave alone. Some suggested I should also loop in Laura and Rob, my higher-ups, formally so Dave couldn't twist the narrative. I took all that to heart. The day after my post, I decided enough was enough. I wasn't going to let Dave bully me into protecting him. I gathered up a portfolio of proof. Emails, code commit histories, the original report in my own doc metadata, and even some Slack conversations where I was explaining things to Dave that he later claimed he did himself. I took a deep breath and went to HR to request a meeting. To my surprise, they scheduled one for me that very afternoon. I later found out why they were so quick to meet. Dave had beaten me to it. When I walked into the HR conference room, I was greeted not just by our HR rep, Michelle, but also by Rob, my manager. It caught me off guard. This was clearly more than a casual chat. As soon as I sat down, Michelle said, "John, we've been made aware of a conflict between you and Dave regarding the recent project. We want to understand what's going on." I realized immediately that Dave must have run straight to HR, likely to preempt whatever he thought I might do. Sure enough, Michelle opened a folder and started referencing some claims. My heart was pounding as she said, "Dave has expressed concern that you've been undermining his leadership on the project and that there was a deliberate attempt to embarrass him in front of a client." I had to bite my tongue not to let out a bitter laugh. The sheer hypocrisy of him playing victim was unreal. But I stayed composed. This was my chance to set the record straight. I told them everything. I walked them through the timeline, how I led the technical work, how Dave took credit in the first big meeting, how I later approached management with clarifications and had Rob's backing, which he confirmed, and then the client presentation fiasco, where I stepped in only to ensure the client got accurate information. I also relayed, as calmly and factually as I could, the private conversation in which Dave basically threatened to frame me for sabotage if I didn't cover for him. Rob's eyes widened when he heard about the threat. That was news to him, and he was clearly not happy. Of course, it was my word against Dave's on the threat since it happened behind closed doors. I was nervous they might doubt me. That's when I presented my stack of evidence. I handed over emails where I had outlined technical problems and solutions, all written by me, which Dave later regurgitated as if they were his ideas. I showed printouts of our code repository logs, highlighting my contributions versus his. I even had a snippet from a document's metadata showing I was the original author of the report he presented. Rob chimed in to back me up, mentioning that others on the team had previously noted Dave taking undue credit for things. The more I shared, the more serious Michelle's face became. She asked a few clarifying questions, took notes, and thanked me for being thorough. She then asked if I had anything in writing regarding the threat. I explained I didn't. It was a face-to-face conversation, but I did mention the follow-up email Dave sent trying to spin the story of the client meeting. I pointed out how his version in that email didn't match reality. For example, him claiming he strategically had me handle technical questions, which wasn't true at all. That seemed to strike a chord. At the end of it, Rob stated firmly, "I appreciate John coming forward. This kind of behavior, if true, is completely unacceptable." Michelle nodded and told me they would look into it immediately and that I'd done the right thing reporting it. I left the meeting feeling cautiously optimistic. At least now the problem was out in the open with people who had authority to do something. Later that day, I got word from Rob that HR had called Dave in for a meeting as well. From what little I heard, HR keeps things confidential, but office grapevine is a thing. Dave did not handle it gracefully. A coworker who sits near HR said they heard some raised voices through the wall. Apparently Dave got defensive and angry when confronted. By the end of that day, Rob told me Dave was being placed on administrative leave pending the investigation. In HR terms, that usually means go home while we figure out if we're going to fire you. I wish I could say I felt triumphant seeing him put on leave, but honestly I mostly felt anxious. It's not fun being in the center of a workplace investigation, even when you're on the right side of it. Plus, I know Dave is a prideful guy. Having his back against the wall like this, I half expected him to do something rash. Work the next day was surreal. Word had quietly spread that something went down between Dave and me. A few teammates gave me discreet thumbs ups or pats on the back, indicating they were glad someone finally called Dave out. I tried to just focus and do my job, but my adrenaline was still high. Every time my email pinged, I jumped, expecting some new curveball. As of my writing this update, Dave is still on leave, and the investigation is ongoing. I feel like HR is likely building the case to terminate him, given the evidence, but I don't have official word yet. They've reassured me that I won't face any retaliation and that my job is secure, which is nice to hear, though I'll only fully relax once this is over. I'm also mentally bracing for possible fallout. Dave doesn't have access to work systems right now, but I wouldn't put it past him to try something like contacting higher-ups, or even the client to spin his own story while he still can. Maybe I'm paranoid, but after seeing his true colors, nothing would surprise me. For now, I'm in a holding pattern, trying to cover my bases and stay professional. It's a weird mix of relief that I stood up and people believe me, and unease, waiting for the other shoe to drop. I really hope the next update I give will be the end of this saga, one way or another. I'll let you all know what happens. Update 2. It's been about a week since my last update, and things escalated quickly and dramatically. Remember how I was half expecting another curveball? It came the very next day. HR had been keeping things pretty tight-lipped as they conducted their investigation, but I got an unexpected bit of intel from an outside source, Dave himself, via his family. Specifically, his wife. I didn't mention this in the last update because I was still processing it, but the morning after I met with HR, I woke up to an email from Dave's personal Gmail in my inbox. Except it wasn't Dave writing. It was his wife. Let's call her Maria. Her tone was respectful, but pleading. She said Dave had told her his version of what was going on at work and that he was devastated. According to her, Dave was worried sick about losing his job, and she wanted to appeal to me to find a, quote, peaceful resolution. She talked about how the stress was affecting their family, how Dave is normally a great father and husband but was under immense pressure at work, and she even offered an apology on his behalf if he had stepped on my toes. It was a lot. To be honest, reading that email made my emotions churn. Part of me felt sorry for her and their kids. They didn't deserve this chaos. Another part of me was furious that Dave dragged his family into our professional mess. It felt like a manipulation tactic, even if Maria's concern was genuine. I decided not to respond to her directly. Instead, I forwarded the email to Michelle HR with a brief note saying I received this and wasn't sure how to proceed. Michelle replied thanking me and saying not to engage. HR would handle any necessary communication. Now on to what happened with Dave officially. HR wrapped up their investigation by the end of the week. From what I gather, via Rob and a couple trusted coworkers who later filled me in, the evidence I gave, combined with corroborating input from others on the team, painted a pretty clear picture of Dave's behavior. Apparently, they even checked the version control logs themselves to verify my story about the code contributions. Dave did himself no favors in his HR interview either. I heard that he was combative and inconsistent in his answers. Classic. Finally, this past Monday, HR made their decision. I came into work to find an email from Michelle asking me to come by her office at 10 a.m. When I got there, Rob was present too. They informed me that Dave was going to be terminated. They didn't dive into too many details, legal/procedural reasons, I guess, but the phrase violation of company ethics in creating a hostile work environment was used. They also made it clear that retaliation against me was not going to be tolerated, and that if I felt unsafe or harassed in any way, I should inform them immediately. I took that as a hint that Dave did not take the news of his pending termination well, because here's the kicker, Dave wasn't actually at work that day yet. They planned to do the termination in person, asking him to come in for a meeting. He was still on leave and hadn't been coming in, so I was advised to stay at my desk and not interact with him if I saw him. I'll admit, even knowing he was getting fired, I felt a knot in my stomach. This was the moment I had wanted, in some sense, accountability for his actions. But it still felt intense and sad in a way. Around lunchtime, word started spreading that security was present on our floor. That usually only happens for one reason. I peered down the hallway and saw Dave, red-faced and agitated, walking with Michelle and a security guard towards a meeting room. He must have noticed me looking because our eyes met for a split second. The glare he gave me was chilling-like, pure hatred. I quickly looked away and tried to focus on my screen, heart pounding. The actual firing meeting was behind closed doors, but it was short. Within maybe 15 minutes, Dave was being led back out, now carrying a cardboard box with what I assume were his personal desk items. They must have pre-packed some of it or had him pack quickly. What happened next is something I'll never forget. And honestly, it was downright scary. As they were escorting Dave out, he suddenly broke away from the security guard and marched straight toward my cubicle. I stood up, startled and bracing myself. He started shouting, actual full volume shouting, things like, "I hope you're happy, you backstabbing piece of..." S asterisk asterisk asterisk. Yes, he dropped a loud expletive in the middle of the office. You think this will make you a hero? Enjoy it while it lasts. The whole office went silent, and all heads popped up over their cubicles like prairie dogs. I was in shock, frozen. The security guard quickly got between us, and Michelle was urging Dave to calm down, saying this wasn't going to help. He didn't try to physically attack me or anything, but for a second I really thought he might. My adrenaline was through the roof. I mustered whatever steady voice I could, and said something like, "This is exactly why you're in this situation, Dave. You did this to yourself." Probably not wise to engage, but the words just came out. He responded with a bitter laugh and spat out, "You're naive if you think they actually care about you. You're just a tool to them. Watch your back." With that charming parting advice, the guard and another colleague had grabbed him by the arms and were firmly steering him toward the elevators. He was still yelling about how the company was making a mistake, how I was a liar, etc., but his voice faded as they got him out the door, and just like that, he was gone. I was left standing there, hands shaking, in front of about 20 coworkers who had just witnessed this insanity. Talk about awkward. One by one, people sort of went back to what they were doing, though I'm sure productivity was shot for the afternoon. Rob came by shortly after to check on me. He apologized that I had to go through that, and said if I needed to take the rest of the day off, I could. I did go home early. No way I could concentrate after that. Now it's the end of the week, and I'm back at work. Things are quieter. Dave's desk has been cleaned out. The client that we presented to ended up signing a preliminary deal with our company, which is great news that's unfortunately been overshadowed by this drama. Laura and Rob have both privately thanked me for stepping up and assured me that I'll be given appropriate credit in future projects. They even discussed possibly putting me in a lead role for the next big project. Dave's old role, essentially. That's flattering and all, but to be honest, I'm still winding down from the stress of this one. As for Dave, I have no idea what his next move is. HR told me he's officially terminated and not allowed back on the premises. I changed all my work passwords just in case, and IT was making sure he had no remaining access to any systems. I half expect him to send some ranting email to the whole company, or try to spin the story to mutual contacts. One coworker said they heard Dave might try to appeal his firing, or even threaten a lawsuit for wrongful termination, but given the evidence against him, I doubt that will get traction. Still, the fact that he didn't go quietly makes me think this isn't completely over.